It's through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the Word of God. It's by faith we know that. I can stand here tonight and tell you that God Himself stepped out into nothing and with the word of His mouth created everything that is. Everything. He spoke it into existence. And He did it in 6 days. Not 6 billion year periods. Not 6 long 1,000-year periods. 6 days, mornings and evenings. First day, morning and evening. Second day, morning and evening. Right on through the 6th day, rested on the 7th day. He stepped back and said, it's good. It's done. It's over. It's good. God did it all, and He did it all that way. You know how I know that? By faith. Because that's what this book says. So by faith, I simply believe what God says. Now listen to me and don't misunderstand what I'm about to say. I cannot prove that. I can't prove it in a scientific way. The only way to honestly prove something in a scientific way is to do it over and over and over and show that when you do certain things, that's always the outcome. We can't do it over and over. It only happened one time. And so I cannot prove it in a scientific way, although there's lots of evidence in the scientific realm. Lots and lots of evidence that shows us that in fact it's true. But I don't believe it because of the evidence. I believe it because God said it. That's Bible faith. And the world looks at that and says, that's ridiculous. You can't just accept it by faith. You have to have science behind it. Lots of science. And so they get lots of science together. They say, here's how it really happened. One day, billions and billions of years ago, there were swirling masses of gas over there. And there were swirling masses of gas over there. And one day the masses swirled and gassed and massed and did what they do. And they ran into each other and boom, there was a big explosion. And out of that explosion were flung pieces of space junk all over. One of those pieces of space junk fell into orbit around the sun. We call that Earth, or Mother Earth if you're of that persuasion. And on that piece of space junk in orbit around the sun there was a primordial ooze. Now nobody knows what primordial ooze is or where it came from, but you've got to have at least some primordial ooze or this won't work. So there was some primordial ooze. In that primordial ooze, there was a tiny one-celled ooze creature. Now nobody knows where that creature came from, but you've got to have at least one of those or this whole thing won't work. There's a lot of those things like that where it doesn't work very well. So there was a tiny one-celled ooze creature. And he was in the primordial ooze, and he was perfectly happy there because he was an ooze creature. And he was just oozing around and having a wonderful time. And then one day, he got too close to the edge of the ooze, and he popped out into open water. And there he was. He was not happy in the open water. He was not a water creature. He was an ooze creature. And in the water, he was knocked all around and he didn't know what to do. And so in a fit of anger and frustration, he went like that. And out popped some fins. And some gills developed. And a tail sprung out. And he began to swim around. And he said, I'm a fish. And life was good as a fish in the water. It's the perfect place to be as a fish. And so there he was for billions and billions of years. He was just a happy fish in the water. And then one day he looked out on the edge of the land and he thought to himself, the grass is greener on the land. And it was. He thought, I want to be out on the land. So he popped out onto the land. Land is not a good place for a fish. And he lay there flopping and gasping and dying on the land. And in a fit of anger and frustration, he went, just like that. And lo and behold, those fins disappeared. And out popped the front leg. And out popped the back leg. And out popped another front leg and another back leg. And he stood up on all fours and he said, I'm a mammal. Now, as a mammal, land is a good place to be. It's a nice place to be. He frolicked in the meadows. That means he played in the grass for you guys over there. He played in the grass. He had a wonderful, wonderful time. And then one day he was looking up in the trees. And he said to himself, life would be better in the trees. The leaves are greener up in the tops of the trees. There's a cool breeze that blows in those trees. I want to go up in the tree. And so he tried to climb the tree. And he fell because he was not a tree mammal. He was a meadow mammal. And he tried again and he fell. And in a fit of anger and frustration, he went, just like that. And lo and behold, out popped a tail. Not just any tail. A long prehensile tail. Do you know what a long prehensile tail is? Don't say you never learned anything in church. It's one of those long tails like a monkey has that can grab onto stuff. And with that long prehensile tail, he could scamper up in those trees and swing from branch to branch. And he was perfectly happy for billions and billions of years. Until that fateful day when he was swinging from branch to branch. And he missed. And he started to fall, and he went down, 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 down. And he landed right on that tail and broke it off. And he stood up and he said, "I'm a man." That's where hockey players come from. You didn't know that, did you? That's where hockey players come from. Well, that's the scientific explanation. You say, hold it now, that's you just oversimplified that, and that's not really the scientific explanation. Oh, yes, it is. As a matter of fact, I even helped him out. I gave him a good reason to change. Did you know, let me tell you the dirty little secret of evolution. They have never found, nor will they ever find, a transitional form fossil. You know what a transitional form fossil is? You're familiar with the term missing link. In every evolutionary chain, whether it's the horses that go from little to big, or whether it's the monkey turning into the man, in between each of the little pictures they have, which half of are completely made up out of thin air, in between each one of those pictures is what they call a missing link. That means there's no transitional form between the two things. You know why? Because there never was. That's why. Just think with me for a minute. If evolution were true, even a little bit, there would be more transitional form fossils than there are stable form fossils. Because according to the theory, we are always evolving. There would be no stable forms. It would be nothing but transitional forms, going from one to the next. And there are none. Zero, zip, none, none. Never have been, never will be, because it didn't happen that way. Listen, if you believe evolution, you know how you have to believe it? By faith. Because you cannot prove it scientifically. That is why it is still the theory of evolution. It's nothing more than a theory, an idea, because it cannot be proven scientifically. And if you accept it, you must accept it by faith. Well, I'd rather accept by faith what God said than by some fairy tale made up by somebody who hates God. Doesn't that make sense to you? It's by faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the Word of God.